Okay, keep going.
Okay, now we're accountable.
I had to make sure that was going.
The Niles Cone is a remarkable groundwater resource, but in the area's source of 40% of the water for the Alameda County Water District. Paul Sethi is on the water board and vice president of this organization, and I'm currently president of this organization and also on the water board, the Alameda County Water District. Michelle has over 20 years experience, technical, legal, policy, and regulatory aspects of groundwater management. She manages a team of hydrologists and technical people as well, and their reporting requirements. She was instrumental in when they developed the Groundwater Management Act of having Alameda County Water District specifically identified as the manager of the Niles Cone. Niles Cone goes under a number of other cities. There are some cities that feel that the geographical boundaries of their city should define the groundwater basin. We have so far been able to overcome that. So a local, St. Joseph's School, Maloney College,
Yes.
San Jose State.
Yes.
So Michelle,
All right.
you're on.
Thank you.
I'll work those slides. You can talk. Same.
Okay. You want me to forward them?
I'll do it.
Okay. I might have to do enter, or I'll just do it because some of them are animated, Tim.
Okay. All right. Well, I gotta admit the people as they come in. So
And I just want to say hi to everybody online. Hopefully you can hear me fine. If you can't, put something in the chat and Tim will help me figure it out. So thanks again for that introduction. And by the way, I will be calling Director Weed, because he is on our board. He is on our board as well as Director Sethi. So sorry, the formality is born in me. So I am a Fremont native, born and raised, Washington Hospital. So it's very fun to be able to serve in the community in which you were raised. So with that being said, I'm going to hop right in and talk about the Niles Cone groundwater basin and our history. Ready?
Yep,
Okay,
go
here
ahead.
we go. Oh,
let me do this.
there we go. Okay, just tap the thing.
Yeah.
All right, so a little bit about what I'll be presenting today is about the water district, who we are, what we do. I'll talk about the history of the Niles Cone, and by the way, I call it Niles Cone, but it is a groundwater basin. And then talk about our groundwater management programs, specifically about how the past is used to protect and manage the basin today. And then, of course, take any questions everybody might have.
Actually, I think if I just touch this, let me try this. Oh, I'm gonna do it.
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's look at my little display up here, but anyhow, go ahead.
It's all good. So the district was founded in 1914, and that was to protect the Niles Cone as well as Alameda Creek. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that came to be later. We have a 5-member board of directors. They are elected within specific areas, and we do have fees that we charge for the services we provide. And we have about 242 full-time employees right now. So where is ACWD located? We're primarily in Fremont, Newark, Union City, and a little bit of Southern Hayward. We are about 105 square miles. We're located on the southeastern portion of the San Francisco Bay Area. And we have over 344,000 people that we serve water to. So here's a little more about our services. Most importantly is we love to supply a reliable, high quality water at a reasonable price. We are a 24/7 operation with emergency response. And what I'll really be focusing in, and I'll touch on some of the other services that we do, but it's our watershed and groundwater resources management protection that I'll be focusing in on what my team does on a day-to-day basis. Okay.
Sorry,
So-
we're seeing what I'm seeing.
It's okay. So we have 3 primary water supply sources. Director Weed talked about one, which is Alameda Creek Watershed, which is part of our, what we consider our local water supply and our groundwater basin. And then we have our state water project that is about another 40%. And then our San Francisco PUC, or the Hetch Hetchy system, accounts for another 20% to make us whole. All right. So about the history, I probably shouldn't have stapled these now that I think about it.
On that picture there,
Sure. Let's see how we go back. Ah, I got it.
where the water is coming out over there, you see kind of a balcony right above it. And at one
With the
time,
dam.
both Leonard Ash from our water district and myself stood there and took pictures.
Oh, very good.
Right off, right off the dam.
Okay. So history,
People were screaming, don't commit suicide.
well, we're very glad you did it, Director Sethi. Okay. So here we're gonna go way back in time, and this cartoon graphic, for those that aren't familiar with what it is like myself, it is actually the Wayback Machine from Rocky and Bullwinkle. My general manager thought it would be fun to put this in the slideshow.
It's Mr. Peabody and Sherman, actually.
Okay.
I-
See?
I know it.
There you go.
I got
Somebody
whole
gave me
series.
wrong information. Okay, anyway. So our story basically begins when the Diablo Range was formed, which is part of the California Coastal Range. And so the Diablo Range was formed during the Pliocene era, which is 5.3 million years ago. And this is when the first kind of clashes within the Niles Cone started to happen. So another very important fact is that Alameda Creek actually predates the coastal range system. So this graphic kind of depicts a little bit about how the Niles Cone was formed over time. And so you can see you have Alameda Creek predating, and then you have the tectonic plate movement of the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate, where you had subduction at the time. It's no longer in our area that way. But anyway, so starting to create different environments like the Sierra Nevada and the coastal range. So the graphic on the very right-hand side is where you kind of start to see how the Diablo Range was formed. And this graphic is not true to actually how it was formed. So it's not like a striped toothpaste kind of being laid out and folded over with like a little hump. The coastal range was actually created more like if you were to take some dough, roll it out very unevenly, take both your hands and smush it together, and you would have little ribbons that through the weight kind of like folded on themselves. It's basically called an accretiary wedge. I am not a geologist. This is a disclaimer. My background is in civil engineering, but that's basically how it was formed. If you have additional geological questions, I can bring back one of my hydrogeologists that can really get into the fun scientific details. But with that being said, so as you have the coastal range forming, Alameda Creek is already there and has significant flow. And that's what created Niles Canyon that we have today. All right. This is another graphic that is really good to kind of help understand the history of Alameda Creek. So at one point, there was no San Francisco Bay. The land went all the way out to the Farallon Islands, and we still had the waters of Alameda Creek. And over time, in different storm events, it would fan out and have different depositional channels because water does like to move in the path of the least resistance. So then you get to, so this is an aerial that of the, Fremont, Newark, Union City area, and you can see the arrow that shows Alameda Creek. And so how this is important is with the different, big rain events and different, the way water's moving throughout our area, you have alluvial deposits that come out of Niles Canyon, and it creates what is called an alluvial fan, or it's a cone, because you can see how it kind of spreads out, and you have different sands and gravels that kind of get deposited at the apex of where it opens up. And so that's how the Niles Cone starts to get formed, is this way. Then you have different glacial periods with the melting and other things that happen. And so you start to see the bay deposits coming in. And what happens is you have this alluvial material that's sands and gravels that then gets kind of layered in with marine sediment that comes in during those glacial cycles. And so you kind of get a cake layering kind of system where you have sands and gravels, and then you'll have finer grain material as well as clays that for a period of time, and then you'll see another bunch of gravels and sands and stuff. And that what that does is that creates aquifers, which I'll explain what those are in a little bit, and then you have aquatards, and that's all part of the Niles Cone. So what is an aquifer? So this is a graphic to hopefully explain it as simply as possible because there's all kinds of different aquifers. The Niles Cone basically has two different types. It's an unconfined aquifer and a confined aquifer. And an aquifer itself is basically you have the sands and gravels and there's pore spaces in between that are filled with water. And that's where our groundwater resides. And so the aquatard material, which is the clays and other fine grained material, it's not completely impervious, but it does restrict vertical movement of water between different layers. So with an unconfined aquifer, typically the surface water will recharge that part of the groundwater basin and the water table will rise and fall with that recharge. And then with a confined aquifer, you have impermeable material above and below. And so the water that's in that area is under pressure. And so if you've ever heard of an artesian well, that's when a well gets drilled into a confined aquifer that has enough pressure that in order for it to get to atmospheric pressure, it will flow regularly. So, or the water level will just go up really high in the well. It might not come all the way out to the surface. But so that kind of is the high flyover explanation of aquifers and aquatards. So that the result is basically the Niles Cone groundwater basin that we have today for our area. So going from east to west, the most eastern part is what we call the apex of the Niles Cone. And you can see blue represents water, by the way, and the white area is basically our clays or our aquatards. So the water of Alameda Creek would move down larger boulders and gravels, and they would get deposited towards the apex of the Niles Cone. The energy of Alameda Creek dissipates over the lateral distance, and so it takes more energy to push those further out, and it just didn't have enough energy. So you start to kind of see things get smaller and smaller as you get out to the bay margin. And so with the above Hayward Fault part of the basin, we see once it's unconfined, and then we have a lot of gravels and cobbles, and it's a very good groundwater producing part of our basin. Then you have the Hayward Fault that's in between. Now the Hayward Fault is a lateral strike slip fault, and through that action of grinding, it actually has created its own impermeable kind of barrier where it prevents the lateral movement of water from the above Hayward Fault to the below. There is some leakage, but it's very small, if at all. And so we know that because of our saltwater intrusion, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So then you get to the west side of the Hayward Fault, and that's where you start to see the different aquifer systems that are confined. In the beginning near Hayward Fault, it's unconfined, but it gets more confined as you go west towards the San Francisco Bay and the salt ponds. So here's a figure that shows the Alameda Creek watershed. So for those of you that have seen the photos from the 1950s, 54, I believe, flooding events and stuff, the Alameda Creek watershed is rather large. It's about 660 square miles. It goes from Mount Diablo down south to Mount Hamilton and east to the Altamont Pass. And all of that water basically, for the most part, gets funneled in through Alameda Creek. So here's a figure that shows the district's boundaries as well as the Niles Cone boundary. And you can see Fremont, Newark, Union City, and parts of South Hayward. And then here's our recharge facilities. So that's Quarry Lake's recreational area, and there's other ponds that are adjacent to that area. And I'll explain why those are so important in our history. And then here's the above Hayward Fault part of the basin and the below Hayward Fault of the basin, just to kind of graphically give you an idea of where those boundaries are. So now we get into the modern era of clashes over the Niles Cone. So I told you that I was going to explain why we were formed. So basically, private water companies were overpumping the groundwater basin and taking the water to Oakland and San Francisco. And the residences at the time said, this is our water. We need to keep it here because water wells were going dry. And so they actually created the district. We're the first special district that was formed under the county water district law. And it was, as I mentioned before, it was to protect the Niles Cone groundwater basin as well as the Alameda Creek watershed. And that, as soon as we were created, our legal battles began, trying to get the private water companies to stop pumping the groundwater of the Niles Cone and exporting it out. So here's a couple of pictures. One is from an article from, I think it's 1914, but it was basically a water district of our own. There's a lot of information online. A lot of the news articles are readily available. And then there's a photo that's on the bottom, and that is from, there's been a lot of different water companies over time that I'm not going to get into, but this was basically the Oakland Water Company, and they installed a well, I think it was in 1869, it's on the graphic. And this is in the Alvarado area. And so this well, I'm not sure what aquifer it was in. It was probably the Centerville Fremont. But anyway, so this well is flowing artesian. So it's in a confined aquifer. And even though you can't see the water because it's a black and white photo, but that blob of white is water flowing freely out of the well in front of the three gentlemen that are in the photo. In my career, we still have artesian wells, by the way, in the Niles Cone. I've never seen a well flow like that in my life. So there was a lot of water to be had. So when it comes to our groundwater resources management, it started as soon as we were formed, because with the legal battles, you have to demonstrate how you're being affected. So as early as 1914, our first general manager, as well as engineer, started to survey wells in the area, as well as groundwater levels, taking water level measurements and creek levels to see how the Niles Cone was being impacted by this exportation of water. Groundwater levels continued to decline, and the district did its first impounding of winter flows in Alameda Creek in 1920. Basically, we moved a lot of soil across Alameda Creek, not the big flood control channel that you're used to seeing today. It was pre the Army Corps project, and built an earthen dam to basically help improve the recharge efforts in Alameda Creek. So as all the legal battles were going on, there was also an increasing need for water because the agricultural use in the area was transitioning from kind of drier crops to more water intensive crops, including fruits and other things, fruit trees. And so water levels continued to decline. And by 1920, the Newark Aquifer that's hydraulically connected to the bay had dropped below mean sea level, and we started to see saltwater intrusion from the bay impact the Niles Cone. And this has a photo, is from one of the log books that the district has a ton of our original documents. And this shows water levels from wells that was taken one time in December 1914. And then this compares it with water level measurements from 1920. And some of the wells at the bottom of the page had over 11 feet lower levels than they did the 6 years prior. So this is a graphic that DWR put together, and we kind of updated a little bit, but this basically shows how saltwater intrusion came into the Niles Cone. As I mentioned, the Newark Aquifer is hydraulically connected. As water levels went down in the Newark Aquifer, the saltwater, because it's heavier than water, came in and went as far east as the Hayward Fault, and then got into our deeper aquifers because we have a lack of aquitard material there. But it also got into the deeper aquifers through abandoned wells. This is a graphic that shows that chloride coming into the basin. The top is our shallow, it's called shallow at the time, it was the Newark Aquifer. And you can see over time how it got worsened. And you can see that the floods in 1954 had some sort of cleanup effect because you have an area of no saltwater intrusion, kind of where a lot of the flooding occurred. And then the deep area is actually the Centerville Fremont. And you can see how that it hits different pockets of areas, and that is likely due to abandoned wells creating that interconnection. This is one of the funnest graphics my team has ever put together. The angry droplets represent salt water. It does not mean that we do not love our San Francisco Bay, because we do. So that's my little disclaimer. So this is an animation that basically shows how that saltwater intrusion took place. So you have water being exported out of the Niles Cone into other areas, and the saltwater comes in all the way to the Hayward Fault. It gets down to the other deeper aquifers, and then it also gets there through abandoned water wells. So this kind of leads into ACWD's groundwater management programs. I've already mentioned a number of them: groundwater levels, trying to recharge the basin, or groundwater recharge or replenishment, and checking in and doing water quality monitoring. This slide kind of shows all of our programs as they are today from a big picture. There's still stuff that's not identified on here. I'm not going to go through all of these, but we can always go back and revisit any of these programs if any of the names on there pique your interest and you want to learn more. So the district took on a number of additional essential actions to really help improve the health of the Niles Cone in combating the saltwater intrusion and the reduction in groundwater storage through the water levels being reduced. The first is the Replenishment Assessment Act of the Alameda County Water District that was first enacted in 1961. And that's where a lot of our groundwater management and authority powers, in addition to the county water district law, come into play. And it also required meters to be put on wells. And I think that there were a lot of public meetings with a lot of people showing up back in the 60s and 70s. And then we diversified our water supply portfolio. So we added some surface water supply sources to kind of ease the groundwater usage. So in 1962, we started getting a state water project water. And then in 1964, we started to get water from the Hetch Hetchy system, or San Francisco PUC. As the area went from a primarily agricultural area to a more urban area, a lot of the older areas where there was ag wells and other wells that the district used to monitor water levels as well as salt water were being destroyed as part of improvement to the land or development. And so the district in the 70s and 80s started to install their own monitoring wells. The biggest effort was 100 wells along kind of the salt pond area to kind of see how the saltwater intrusion was occurring. And then another significant milestone was the Aquifer Reclamation Program, where the district installed water wells within some of the former depositional channels of Alameda Creek. And those wells are in the Newark Aquifer as well as the Centerville Fremont. And pumping the Newark Aquifer wells removes that trapped brackish groundwater, but it also makes room for the fresh water that we're recharging to kind of get out laterally in the basin. And then we pump the Centerville Fremont wells to remove the trapped brackish water because that's not hydraulically connected to the bay. So it wasn't until 2003 that the district actually used that water for potable water supply. Before, it was just pumped and discharged to the bay. The chloride concentrations in that water was still lower than what was at the bay. But now we use that water as part of our water supply portfolio, which is great.
So, Michelle.
Yes, sure.
The significance of 2003 is the operation of our desal.
Yes, desal went online.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we were using that low salinity water to purify that.
Correct.
But I want to point out the picture here.
Yes. Oh, yes. The signing of the state water
So
project.
I'm almost positive that the man who's on the far left is
Glasses, okay.
The founder of Fremont Bank.
Can everybody hear what Director Suthy's saying online, that the person on the very left might have been the
Mars Hyman, the founder of Fremont Bank.
Mars Hyman, founder of Fremont?
Mars Hyman,
Why don't you come up here?
who was the longtime attorney for the water district concurrently while he was the founder of Fremont Bank in 1964. And then the person that's next to him is the longtime general manager of the water district, Matt Whitfield.
Okay,
62.
okay,
Was so-bad.
very good.
So Morris Hyman and Gene Rhodes, longtime politician, council member, mayor. The two of them were the attorneys for the water district from 1954 until 1994, 40 years.
Very good.
Same for
Okay, so this next slide shows graphically kind of some of the big milestones of different infrastructure or other things the district had done over time. And this is of the Newark Aquifer. We call this from our indicator well. But you can see that water levels continued to decline until about 1974 is when we fairly consistently started to get water levels above mean sea level in the Newark Aquifer to start to push that brackish groundwater or saltwater intrusion back out towards the bay. And we went from earthen dams to rubber dams and just really improved the overall recharge of the system. We bought former quarry pits in order to better the recharge activities and get more water into the Niles Cone. And that the first one we purchased was in the 1930s. I can't remember the exact year right now. So speaking of groundwater replenishment and recharge activities, so this shows the Quarry Lakes recreational area from a surface water area. It's about 400 acres worth of area there that we use to recharge. I believe that might include a little bit of Alameda Creek, which is the small silver line that you can see the red arrow pointing down to. And then there's one of our rubber dams that we inflate during specific times of the year to impound water behind it in order to improve the recharge within Alameda Creek itself. So this is the happy graphic. This is our recharge efforts, bringing in that happy fresh water and recharging the basin and pushing that brackish groundwater back out towards the bay. And then our aquifer program, ARP wells, removing the trapped brackish water out. And what that results in the Newark aquifer area being restored. And here you can see this is the latest graphic from last year. Showing that area of cleanup, which is the black dashed area. And it's really important for the district in order to continue this level of cleanup. We never fully expect it to be fully cleaned up, by the way, but as long as we can kind of keep things the way that they are right now, we've done a pretty good job because we know sea level rise will eventually come again or come into play. But we try to keep the groundwater gradient in the Newark Aquifer back out towards the bay on a regular basis. So this is basically what our recharge and reclamation program looks like today. You can see our various well fields and you can see how we pump the blue water's the fresh water or no salt intrusion to it. And then you have the teal color being that brackish groundwater. The brackish groundwater in the area right now, it's all under 2,000 micrograms per liter. It's not really that salty, but it's enough where you wouldn't want to drink it. You would notice it. So, but yeah, so it's important to keep that Newark aquifer gradient for the saline outflow. I already talked about our groundwater monitoring program starting in 1914. They continue today. The figure on the bottom left shows our monitoring network, and here's some of the groundwater resources staff out hard at work, sampling wells for the chloride concentrations, as well as getting water level measurements.
Want to check chat for a second?
Oh yeah, go ahead. We're gonna check chat for a second.
You can go keep talking.
Okay. So this next slide talks about the district's well ordinance program and the Groundwater Protection Act. And so the district actually has been on the cutting edge of a lot of things for our whole history. The first and foremost is requiring water wells to be destroyed whenever land is improved. It started as early as the 50s. This is before permits were even required for wells to go in or to be destroyed. And we've worked cooperatively with our land use agencies ever since to ensure these types of the abandoned water wells are getting properly destroyed. And in our authority came actually through city ordinances, all 4 cities. And it wasn't until 2010 that the district, because technology was changing so much and the drilling methodology was getting deeper and wider and could potentially impact the basin more significantly. And so That's when the Groundwater Protection Act was enacted in 2010. And it basically gives us all the same authority we had, but the board of directors can update its ordinance whenever it feels it's necessary. And then we can update our standards as well. You can see how many drilling permits we issue in a year. Those are not for water wells. They're primarily geotech work or chemical investigation work done by consultants. And we typically see more wells destroyed in a year than we do installed. So about 10 every year get destroyed. And we maybe have 1 or 2 new water wells going in, if that, every other year. It's very rare these days. And most of the time they're replacement wells. So how does this history still come into play with finding the old water wells? Well, we have maps dating back to 1914. We still have them, the original copies. There's multiple maps from that time frame. We also have a lot of figures and aerials. The district staff has always been really good at making friends with water well drillers in the area. So when they would retire, they'd go, "Hey, you want my well log book?" And so here's a photo of one of those books, where you can see J.S. Furtado had a well installed and he paid in December of 1913. But this log has the lithology also, and we use that data today to help us understand the basin more all the time.
Question,
Yes, we have a question.
I asked you this earlier.
Okay,
So how many wells do we have in the Tri-City area today active?
okay.
How many total have been destroyed?
Okay, so water wells, not active, but historically, we've had over 1,900 wells within our area, which we're not that big of an area. And you can see this graphic shows, you can see that every major road probably had a home built before 1920. It had its own well, right? And, but today, we've destroyed over 1,200 of those wells. So there's still some abandoned wells out there. How many active wells there are in the basin is about 100. And that does not include ACWD's production wells. So there's about 100. And some of those are actually in the hills. So they're not in the Niles Cone, for the record. I want to point that out.
Got a question here?
Yes.
You want to read it, Jane?
Okay. Let's see.
How involved?
How involved is the process of destroying historic water wells? Are there many vendors capable of doing it responsibly? So it's not as complicated as one might think, but every well has its own personality, is the way I best describe it. Unfortunately, property owners sometimes would remove them. So there's different types of well pumps and motors. I'm not going to go down that road right now. But sometimes they would cut the pump column pipe and drop the pump to the bottom of the well. And so part of a well being properly destroyed is you need to get everything out of the well and clean it out till you're in native. And so sometimes that makes it tricky. So I will say in my 20, well, because I was an intern, by the way, before I was a permanent employee, but in my 23 years with the district, the number of water well drillers that have the expertise to destroy the wells is diminishing. It's getting harder and harder and more expensive to destroy these wells. And so we have a really good working relationship with the group from the Department of Water Resources, and they're looking at updating their standards for how water wells should be destroyed. And so we're informing them of the struggle to get people to bid on projects to destroy wells. So hopefully that answers your question. The chat went away.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
On the water wells, you showed in a video that there was water wells that was allowing saltwater intrusion to get down into the water district. So when you destroy a well, you fill it up with something so
Yeah.
that water doesn't get moved down?
Correct. So to destroy the well, basically we want the well to have no debris or other material in it. And you want to get down to what we call native. So native formation of the basin. And we typically will know based on the age of the well and the diameter, if we don't have the actual well log, how deep it was, about what level it is. And so once they do that and they've cleared everything out, they have to perforate. So what we want to do, let me go back. How easy is it to go back?
Is that forward? No,
That's forward. I had it before. Oh, I got it.
Okay.
Oh, I forgot to talk about that other photo. Okay, so in this graphic, the orange is the clay, so it's the aquitard. So let's say a well is like this. Hopefully you guys can all see my pointer right in here. And let's say it's screened in or it's screened down here, but it has no,
Somebody, 1 second. Oh,
Oh.
it just disappeared. Oh,
no, I
All
think it just pulled down the screen.
okay.
That it's screened down here and there's no annular seal. So in today's technology, when you drill a well, you're going to over drill it and you're going to put an annular seal or cement seal on the outside that prevents the vertical migration of water up and down the well casing. Older wells don't have that. They were drilled with a cable tool, which means it was just basically pounded into the ground. And then they ripped with a mill's knife. And actually I have a picture of that I forgot to talk about. So see that right here, you see this opening. That's how they used to perforate old wells. This is in our Centerville Fremont Aquifer. Those are the gravels, and the black void behind it is all groundwater. I love this photo. And so, so what we do is they clean out the well, they perforate where the clay is because we want cement to kind of reestablish that aquitard on the outside of the casing. And when they fill up inside the casing with the cement, that prevents water moving inside. So we want to prevent water moving up and down inside the well as along the outside of the well. So that's basically how it's destroyed.
You would,
Those are great
mention we
questions.
have, let's say 100 wells
Yeah,
that are privately owned.
yeah.
But I think it would be helpful to think in scale of how much of the groundwater
Oh, yeah.
is being used by the district and how much is being
Correct.
pumped by the private well.
Very valid question. So I don't have the exact number of acre feet per year, but I think on average, it's around 18,000 acre feet to about 20,000 acre feet is pumped from the Niles Cone a year. And about 90%, probably more like 93, is the district. It's us using that as part of our potable water supply. Pardon me, the rest is private well owners and operators, as well as the cities. They use it for irrigation, like at Central Park. Wait, is that what it's called?
Lake Elizabeth.
Like, yeah, but
Central
Lake
Park.
Elizabeth, Central Park. I couldn't remember. Sorry. So yeah, so we're the majority of the groundwater use in the area.
And the cost of the water?
Okay. So it depends on what you're using the water for. So our board of directors just adopted an increase in our, what we call our replenishment assessment rate.
Oh, don't announce that.
Oh, I just did. And so it is $557 an acre foot. We are cheaper than most of the other agencies that do replenishment assessment rates. And so did that help you, Director Sethi? Is that good? Okay. And then if you're using the groundwater for agricultural purposes, so for example, if you're out at Patterson, somebody's gonna start planting pumpkins soon, I hope this year. And so they'll be selling those pumpkins and they'll be paying a whopping $8 an acre foot for that water that they'll be using out there.
So municipal and recreation.
Yeah, well, that's ag,
Another
yeah.
question.
Oh.
So the well is plugged, it's filled completely with a sand cement slurry or neat cement. All the way down to the bottom. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, I talked about this photo. There's a drill rig on this. If you have never seen a drill rig, if you've seen them out in Fremont, Newark, and Union City, you best believe an ACWD truck is going to be nearby, making sure that they're following the law. And then talking about the San Francisco PUC and Bay Division pipeline, this is actually a shaft that we required them to get a permit from us. They actually froze the groundwater basin in the area because there was a contaminant plume from an old chemical facility, and they didn't want to move that chemical plume. So they actually froze the groundwater in order to dig this shaft that was the receiving tunnel for the Bay Division pipeline improvements. We've been able to see a lot of cool things working in the groundwater resources group. Okay, so I talked about those maps, sorry. Okay, and then
That was the last one.
so we took the paper maps and we digitized them. So how does that help us today? So this gets more to how the history helps us. So this is in Union City, and Levy Road is now Union City Boulevard, if I'm remembering correctly. Okay, very good.
I know it.
Okay, yeah, see, that's great. So we use the Sanborn maps. We love the Sanborn maps. And then we have our 1915 well location map, and that was from Cyril Williams Jr. And then DWR came in and did a study. There's a lot of studies on the Niles Cone, which is awesome. And it really helps us understand the basin. And so they came in and did a survey of wells at that time. And actually they used the state well identification number, which is used as township, range, and section. And we use that numbering to this day for our wells. And then here you can see on a new aerial where the current well is located. And here's actually where the well is located in the center of all these photos. So using those old historical maps, we're able to narrow down our search area, and we take a metal detector out there with a shovel and we dig and we find the well, and then we put a plug in it, and then we notify the property owner, we found your well, please destroy it. And so other ways we've found wells, sometimes you just walk up to them. They could be flowing artesian. That's near Cushing Park. You see that artesian well right there. That was about 25 gallons per minute. It has since been destroyed. And then you can sometimes run up to the motor on top. Sometimes we don't know about all the wells. Permits were not required until 1974, and there are data gaps in our maps. This isn't a photo that really demonstrates that, but it does demonstrate that even a little 2-inch monitoring well can cause over $200,000 worth of construction delays to the BART project that was over by Central Park. We warned them about the well, but they dug anyway. And so that really caused them a lot of problems. So that's one of my team members GPSing the well so that we don't lose its location before they destroy it. And then the easiest way to find things is through an excavator.
Let's check chat again for the
Yep.
question.
Does our injection affect the Hayward Fault or lubricate it? So I am not a seismologist nor a geologist. I do know that USGS loves to come over and collect water samples from our wells, and they have done that. They have never told me that it is creating a problem.
And for those people online, thanks for putting your questions in chat. If you have any questions on chat for those online, please just add it to the chat
Yes, perfect.
and we'll catch them.
We do have a famous story from PJ Bunting, our former president, here passed away, you know, PJ.
Yes.
Many
Yes.
of our meetings. Where his father and other people in Niles were warning one of the contractors there about drilling close to the Hayward Fault. And all of a sudden, there was this huge rupture. And the water was shooting straight up in the air. But, you know, like a geyser. And
In Niles?
BJ was a little kid when all that happened. But his dad, along with a water board member, were both out there when this happened.
Okay. All right.
So you don't want to get too close to the fault.
Well, we have well fields on either side of it, so.
You don't want to be drilling.
Right, right. Okay, so more about our groundwater protection program. I talked a little about saltwater intrusion is one of the things that we do to protect groundwater, dealing with it. But also we've gone to libraries and we've pulled out all the old phone books looking for old dry cleaners and gas stations that aren't around anymore to see if there's any potentially cleanup sites that we need to look at in the future. A lot of our groundwater protection responsibility comes through cooperative agreements because the cities tend to be the oversight as well as the regional water quality control board. So we have cooperative agreements with all of them. And that helps us to make sure that sites are properly investigated and cleaned up in order to protect the groundwater basin. And as of late, and as usual, we're keeping an eye on contaminants of emerging concern. Most recently, if you're not aware of polyfluoral alkyl substances, we're keeping an eye on PFAS within the basin. And then sea level rise. So you can see there's the photos, by the way, is of a tank excavation, and the stained soil is where that tank leaked. Technology keeps bettering the underground storage tanks. And so this was a single wall tank that had leaked. But then with saltwater intrusion, as well as sea level rise with the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project, where the state purchased property from Cargill Salt. And now you have the Eden Ecological Reserve. District staff spent years going out there and trying to find these old wells from the different salt companies that were out there over time. And here you can see we were able to find 2 of them, and then they were ultimately destroyed, which is great news to protect the groundwater basin from additional expedited impact. Our watershed program, the district is very committed to it, and we just finished our last fish passage project to allow steelhead trout, a protected species, to be able to migrate within Alameda Creek. This is very important to us so that we can still divert water off of Alameda Creek and recharge Quarry Lakes area for the enjoyment of all. Okay, and I see we have a question. Does ACWD have clear water rights to the groundwater, or has there been some contest to ACWD over mineral rights? Okay, I can't speak to mineral rights. Somebody recently asked me that question. But as far as our groundwater rights is a very interesting topic within the state of California. It is different and a little more complicated than I think surface water rights. So, yes, we clearly have rights to groundwater within the Niles Cone, but so do individual property owners. But you have to be able to have the space for a well, to be able to maintain a well and properly destroy it. And there's not a lot of properties in Fremont, Newark, and Union City where there's enough space to install a water well. I hope that answers the question. Okay. And then public outreach and commitment to our customers. So the Groundwater Resources Group actually participates in a lot of our outreach efforts. Most importantly is our high schools within the area, within the district's boundary. We go to during Groundwater Awareness Week, which is in March. And we present to the advanced science classes to any school that will take us. So if you know any teachers at any of the high schools, we're almost begging sometimes to get into those classes. And so we have a very dedicated team that wants to, even though schools teach about groundwater, it's a little different when you actually have a groundwater basin that's utilized the way ours is right under your feet. So we kind of call ourselves the water source that is never seen or heard, but you know, we try to educate. It's hard. We fight a lot with surface water. They get all the attention. Sorry, bad joke. All right, so Director Weed had mentioned the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. So this was signed into law into 2014. Everything that I've talked to you about today about our groundwater management programs all predates this. It predates any requirement for groundwater management. The district has been on the cutting edge, and we already had everything going in our favor where the state was catching up to what other agencies like ours were already doing. But what it did allow was the formation of groundwater sustainability agencies. And the district is the exclusive agency for the Niles Cone. It's interesting with the enactment of SGMA, it does provide powers to a groundwater sustainability agency or GSA. We already have a lot of those powers through our Replenishment Assessment Act. So there's a few extra things that are in there, but for the most part, we already have what we needed.
And the Replenishment Act is in state law.
That is in state law, yes, yeah. And then, but we're required to develop groundwater sustainability plans or submit alternative plans. So there's about 515 groundwater basins within California, and this is a graphic kind of showing that. And then here's the Bay Area, pardon me. Medium and high priority basins are required to comply with the act. So the green areas, like for instance, San Mateo County in San Francisco, currently are not, they're considered low, but they're working their way up because they're installing more water wells and trying to develop groundwater supplies. So how did the district comply with SGMA? So we submitted an alternative plan back in 2016. DWR approved it in 2019. Yes, 3 years later. And then we submitted our alternative update in 2021, which just got approved this past month, or this month, I should say, by DWR. So what SGMA has you do is it has you look at your groundwater basin and see what are your potential undesirable results that you're dealing with. And with the saltwater intrusion issue, it wasn't once groundwater levels got restored, we knew we weren't going to have lower groundwater levels and the below Hayward Fault be a problem because of the way that we operate the basin. But seawater intrusion is still something that we need to prepare for and look at, especially while there's different modeling of different sea level rise projections and how's that going to impact the Niles Cone. So that's really the biggest issue that we're looking in order to make sure that we're sustainably managing the basin for the below Hayward Fault part of the basin. It is one of the potential undesirable results in the above Hayward Fault part of the basin. And this just goes to speak how the district, even one well not being able to be used by its property owner, the district has made sure to keep water levels in that part of the basin above 15 feet. Once that well gets destroyed, we'll talk about what other levels maybe the above Hayward Fault needs to be operated at. But even the one, we take into consideration to make sure that they have adequate water in their well. I do have an asterisk on water quality degradation. Up until PFAS became apparent that it was in the basin at very, very low levels, by the way. We really didn't have any nitrate issues. We had little pockets here and there, but it didn't really affect anybody. And so this is new for us. And looking how to ensure the sustainable management of the basin with PFAS being present in our groundwater supply. And with that, I will conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to take more questions. I have tons of backup slides just in case, but I wanted to be mindful of my 35-minute request to presentation. I think I went 37.
So we have Phil again, for those online, please ask your questions in chat and we'll see them.
I know out in Central Valley, I've read that, they've been pumping water out of the aquifers and the ground is something like 20-odd feet. We don't have that problem because, the land won't sink, the seawater will come in and hold the water, hold the land up, right, pretty much?
So, so the question was about subsidence in the Niles Cone and how come it's happening in Central Valley and we didn't have it. Our groundwater levels went very, very low. At one point, we were minus 60 feet below sea level. That is huge. We could have had subsidence. We didn't because we don't have that same inelastic type of behavior. And it was the Newark Aquifer that went down that level. People didn't have wells in the deeper zones like they did in the Central Valley. And so once again, I'm not a geologist. Joyce, if I got any of this wrong, by all means, speak up. You probably know more than me. But it has shown not to be a problem. Like for instance, Santa Clara Valley, the Valley Water District, they did have subsidence when their basins were drawn down at the same time ours were. The most subsidence we had was, I want to say it was, gosh, it's in our Sigma annual report. It wasn't even a foot. It was nothing. It was maybe a centimeter or something like that. But now with LiDAR, which is where they do the remote sensing of the rise and fall of land surface, you can actually see, we call it breathing internally, where you can see the little bit of rise and fall from our groundwater recharge operations. It's very interesting to see, but it's not a problem in our area.
So we had a couple questions online. One is, has recent drought caused any subsidence that's adversely affected the capacity aquifer? The answer is no.
No, in fact, the DWR LiDAR data showed that even during the drought in 2013, when groundwater levels were the lowest they had been in a long time, that it was nothing. It was, as far as it could be, a rounding error.
Here's another one from Jane. Why don't you read that?
Okay, regarding anticipated sea level rise and possible saltwater intrusion, what significant below fault basin sites, in addition to quarry lakes, are percolating fresh water into the Niles Cone? How much should we be aware of?
Chewing our fingernails.
Chewing our fingernails over the effect of annual rainfall variations. So this is where it gets interesting. So the groundwater basin gets recharged through a number of, we have a ton of different, you have agua caliente. I don't know what it's called these days. Joyce, you should just come up here next to me. Aqua Fria, yeah, we have Mission Creek, we have all these Sabercat Creek and a lot of other areas that really help to recharge the basin. And we have obviously the normal rain. Now, climate change projections are a tricky business, but for all intents and purposes, the state is projecting for our watershed that we will have flashier events and more water through those events. So when the rain is good, we're going to capture it. So that'll hopefully offset those droughts. But if you have multiple years, we haven't really had a lot of years back to back of drought. So hopefully we'll be able to capitalize on that. But there's still more work to be done. The district just developed its climate adaptation plan. So if you're interested in that topic, I highly recommend you go to www.acwd.org and check out our board meeting agenda.
And one more question from Roger.
Okay. Does ACW do any porosity management to the aquifers? This is typically done by an oil and gas field management. I think what you're asking is, do we sample the soil to see how permeable it is? I think that's what you're asking me. Yes, but we actually do it the opposite. So we actually will collect clay samples and do some permeability testing on those to see how the aquitard is performing in preventing water vertical movement up and down. The way we test how the aquifers can perform is through a pump test. And that's how much a yield a well can provide. And so on average, it depends on what aquifer a well's screened in, but we have very good producing wells that aren't even that large in diameter. They're typically about 16 inches in diameter. Some other water agencies have like 24, or like somebody else has like it's really big. I don't even know how many inches. I want to say it was like 5 feet, but I digress. So we pump those to see how much we can get, and we can get pretty much between 2,000 up to 3,500 gallons per minute out of our wells, and that's significant out of a water well for an agency like us. Hopefully that answered your question, Roger. If I didn't, maybe say no.
Her email is on the screen.
That's true too.
You can't hide.
Yeah.
Any more questions online, please ask. Any more questions here?
How do you work with East Bay Mud?
So how do I work with them?
Yeah.
Well, East Bay Mud is a little further north. And so, but they do have their adjacent aquifer that is the, oh boy, East Bay Plain. Their groundwater basin's called the East Bay Plain, and both East Bay Mud and the city of Hayward manage that basin. So we communicate regularly with them. I have quarterly meetings with their groundwater resources team. East Bay Mud doesn't use groundwater as part of their potable water supply. They do have it in their portfolio for the future. It's called their Bayside project. But their system's a little bit different. They actually have a well where they inject potable water into the deep aquifer to then recover in the future, but it's a very small scale right now.
So Roger's got a continuation. I was thinking of chemical injection.
Oh yeah, we don't do it. No, we are not a fan of chemical injection unless it's to clean up a cleanup site.
So I got quick questions. I know in Union City, Hayward has a pump or something at the corner of Dakota and Mission.
That is their pump station for the San Francisco PUC.
Oh, so they're bringing water from the
Yes.
Hetchy.
Hetchy
Okay.
and yes.
Because I live in Union City and I see it all the time. So I'm just curious about
Yeah,
what's Hayward doing with the building in Union City?
right.
That's their pump. All right.
Yep.
Michelle, I was gonna add that the reason Oakland was capturing water down here and piping it all the way up to their city was because they did not have a really good groundwater system
Right.
to leverage. And neither did Hayward for the most part.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
that's why they were essentially stealing the water from the Niles Cone aquifer.
Yeah,
Same with San Francisco.
correct. The Alameda Creek watershed is a formidable watershed, and the power and the flow coming in our area makes for a really great groundwater basin. The East Bay Plain does have lower sustainable yield, I want to say. But our deep aquifer and their deep aquifer, so you're talking about 400 feet and deeper, are hydraulically connected. And so it's very important that all of our agencies work together because we don't want anybody to run out of water.
Or hydraulically connected, what benefit is there shipping it from here to there when it's gonna go down? Something that's connected.
Correct. It's hydraulically connected, but with some impedance is the best way I would put it. We try to keep and use all of the water that we recharge with it. We have what we call a conjunctive use program. So typically when you look at how much water we recharge, we're extracting pretty close to that same number and kind of keeping the water within our area.
Michelle, I just wanted to add this for our historical purposes
Yeah.
here, because you were involved with this intimately. When we had our centennial anniversary in 2014, and we were doing research on past board members and general managers, we could not find a single photo or any biography of our first general manager, Cyril Williams. And so I went on this detective trek that took, I think, 4 years. Because we hardly knew a thing about him. And I had gone up to the State California Library where his name is referenced everywhere. He was a really important figure. But we couldn't find a photo, and he was the general manager and chief engineer for 20 years. So it was kind of a mystery. And then through one sequence of event after another, I was able to track down his grandson, who lives here in Newark and worked for USG and had followed essentially in his grandfather's footsteps. And so he came down to the district to meet with Michelle and myself and our general manager and brought boxes
Yes.
of data, even predating the formation of the water district, because he was already studying the Niles Cone.
Mhm.
And through the grandson, we were able to retrieve this, just a tremendous treasure
Yes.
of information on the Niles Cone aquifer. And Michelle inherited all that.
I do, and I go through it weekly. And so Cyril Williams Jr. and Director Sethi was able to find a photo, and that photo is in my office because it's so funny when you're looking at this person's maps and, the amazing, surveying that he had done, where basically me and my team can go out there and basically go right up and almost put our foot in a 12-inch well. That's how accurate his stuff was. That it was nice to put a face. He didn't look how I thought he would look. It's very interesting when those kind of things
Yeah.
come to fruition, right?
But
But my predecessor's predecessor had been looking for photos of him for his whole career, and he worked 20 years before me. So it was a great find.
yeah, we actually have a set of photos, and we had a nice portrait that we put up in the
Yeah.
boardroom.
Yeah,
And we had a special commemoration
we
that
did.
evening with the grandson and
Yeah, that
his
was
wife,
nice.
and
That was nice.
it was a real good reward after,
Yeah.
I think, 4 or 5 years of effort to find him,
Yeah.
trace him down.
And I want to follow up to Roger's question because I was thinking about it more and I'm like, you know what, Roger, we do have worked with Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories with isotope tracing. And so we've put those in our recharge facilities and have been able to figure out the age of the water within the different aquifers. Please don't ask me what it is right now. I'll have to circle back, but it's old. So we have done isotope tracing.
Any more questions? So the Pariani case? Does that ring a bell to anybody?
Toronto?
No.
Pariani. Pariana?
Might be what they're talking.
Is it the Pariana case? Let me bring up chat real
Yeah,
quick. On
or
here.
Google it.
I'm just gonna bring up, so. Here, everybody, I'm gonna highlight it, so you guys can, even though in the room can see it.
Can't see it as well now as before. contrast is lower.
So that's what he's saying. So Roger, can you expand on, we're not really seeing what you're saying. Isotope dating of underground water making water a mineral. Oh. Ring a bell with you at all?
No,
Okay,
sorry.
I don't think we'd answer it for you.
I have staff that's way smarter than me. They'll know the answer and I can email it back out. If they know.
Well, Michelle, we want to thank you for your presentation this evening.
Thank you. It was a
Very
pleasure.
It's good to know, what's below the ground that we're walking
Yeah.
on top of everything.
Did either of you learn anything new?
Yes.
Oh, good. That's them. I did a good job.
All right, so it looks like our meeting's over. I'm gonna stop the online meeting. We have refreshments, so let me go ahead and.
Tim, before you,
Yes, Patty.
good, that answers the question. This is the first time I'm using this new Zoom and on my new computer, and I was having trouble with the microphone. You can hear me. I got it to work. Huzzah. Good
Okay.
meeting.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
I'm gonna close out the online meeting. Thank you very much.
All right.